Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and welcome to Prog Chattery 777. We're chatting about Rush, and we're truly coming towards the home stretch with Vapor Trails, their 17th studio album, originally released in 2002 and then famously re-released in 2013 for reasons which I'll chat about later in the video. Because the headline story with Vapor Trails is, of course, the fact that it is their triumphant return. This is their comeback album after a 6-year hiatus. Neil Peart in the late 90s suffered two terrible tragedies. In the span of less than a year, I believe, he lost both his daughter and his wife in separate tragic circumstances. And when you think about it, that's really one of the very worst things a human being could possibly experience. So naturally the band took some time off, and Neil got his life together again by going on a spiritual journey on his motorcycle across the Americas. And after the healing process of time, by the time 2002 rolled around, Neil was ready to join his buddies in Rush once again, and they delivered Vapor Trails. And it is a fantastic, fantastic album. It's loaded with a raw intensity and a raw energy that is actually not on a lot of other Rush albums, which we'll talk about. In a lot of ways, it carries on right where they left off after Test for Echo. Both Counterparts and Test for Echo re-established that heavy sound, and Vapor Trails continues to deliver that very heavy sound. There's some very heavy tracks on this, some of the heaviest stuff in their catalog, I would argue. So that's really, really cool. But what makes the album really unique is the way that it was recorded. When they first got back together, they just plugged in their amplifiers, turned on the recording gear, set up the drums, and just recorded a whole bunch of free improvs and just free jamming. And they recorded hours and hours and hours of this stuff. And from those improvs and jam sessions, they took little tiny bits and pieces and, okay, this part sounds kind of like a verse, this sounds like a chorus, this could be a bridge. And they assembled much of the album out of those original jams. And the result is a great spontaneity that is rarely captured on a Rush album. And like I said, it makes the album quite unique. Rush have a reputation of having very, very arranged songs. There's a very rigid sort of feeling where this is how the song goes, and this is this drum fill was written this way, and this bass line goes this way. There's never really been a sense of free improvisation with Rush. This isn't necessarily free out improvisation. All the little bits of jamming that have been spliced together are constructed to form well-arranged songs, but because they use those little bits of jamming and improv, you really get that spontaneity, like I said, which is great. And I think it was a really good idea for them to do that, because they're never going to capture that sheer excitement and energy of finally jamming together again for the first time in 6 years. You're never going to capture that energy any other way than recording those first magical moments. And this is a great album because it does capture that magical moment, and it's an inspirational thing. There's a seriousness to the lyrics on the album because obviously, as a writer, Neil Peart wouldn't have been able to just sideswipe his experiences and just carry on writing as he used to. So there's a number of songs on the album that do deal with his experiences and his long motorcycle journey and whatnot. So that's certainly a significant factor with the lyrics on the album. Another interesting fact is the lack of keyboards. This is actually the first time since Corrosive Steel, way back in the 70s, that there's no keyboards whatsoever on any of the tracks, which is, that's really interesting when you think of it. You always think of the Power Trio, and, at the end of the day, they're known for being, a heavy rock band primarily led by the guitar, even though they had the synthesizer period, the hardcore keyboard period. But it's kind of crazy to think that there's very, very few albums in their catalog that contain no keyboards at all, and this is really one of four, I guess, one of four albums to be completely without keyboards. So that's interesting. That being said, the original album was totally saturated with a hell of a lot of guitar overdubs. So the sound was very, very full. It was that wall of sound kind of production style, which I'm going to talk about in greater detail in a couple of seconds. But the other thing that kind of is in place to replace the keyboards is Geddy Lee's vocals. He kind of hints at it a little bit on Counterparts and Test for Echo. but he does a lot of backing vocals, and he almost creates a choir of Gettys in the background to kind of replace those textured synthesizer lines of the 80s. So that's really interesting. That might be a controversial thing for some people, because some people can only take so much Getty. But I really like it. I think it really adds an exotic texture to a lot of the tracks. So I'm certainly in favor of the Getty choir in the background. I think it's quite cool. But now on to the controversy. The original album, when it came out, it suffered from, let's be honest, terrible production. It was extremely muddy, and there was absolutely no clarity to the original mix, which is, again, a unique thing in the Rush catalog, because they're known for having a very, clear, defined sound. And it was not present whatsoever on the original album. And why that is, Rush was just simply a victim of the loudness wars, where, engineers and producers were, they had this obsession with cranking every single musical detail to the absolute max. So whether it's an acoustic guitar, an electric guitar, or a little piece of vocals, everything the levels are just right up. So the end result is a completely oversaturated mix with no space and no dynamics. And when the remix came out in 2013, and I'm very glad the remix came out, it's amazing how much more detail you get out of the songs. The remix actually sounds like Rush. And it's a controversial thing, actually, because I think there are a lot of people that still really enjoy the original mix, because it's muddy and because it's thrashy. I mean, people say that kind of, captures that energy. I personally disagree. I prefer clarity. I'll take clarity over, thrashiness any day. And I still think, even though this is, the remix is much more clear and defined, it still captures that energy, in my opinion. But the clarity is just so worth it. I mean, embarrassingly, for me anyway, embarrassing for me, there's so many parts on the original album that I didn't even realize were acoustic guitar. That's how distorted the mix was. It sounded like, a distorted electric guitar, and then when the remix came out, it's like, holy shit, there's a lot of acoustic guitar on this album. I'm sure it would have been overdubbed, but that's significant. That's a testament to how dodgy the original mix was. But it's all good, because we did get the remix, and the remix is fantastic. But this is good too. That'd be an interesting comment war. What is your preference, my loyal viewer, my dear viewer? Do you like the original, or do you like the remix? I like the remix, but if you like the original, give me your reasons why. Anyway, let's start dissecting the tracks then, shall we? I'm going to put the original one down, because I'm tired of holding both records. We'll just hold the remix up. So, the album opens with One Little Victory, and I gotta be honest, this is one of my very favorite Rush songs. This captures so much energy, and it's gotta be one of the best album openers of all time. It comes in with that double bass, that crazy pattern, and Lifeson's thrashy guitar, that classic thrashy guitar, goes way back to the classic albums like Farewell to Kings. It's just fantastic, and it's I'm not sure whether this was taken from one of the improv jams or what, but it's got a great arrangement to it. It's got that proggy arrangement. There's lots of different riffs. But it is just a fire of energy, and there's the Getty choirs in the background, and that creates a great texture to it. One of my very favorite Rush songs, actually. I love One Little Victory. It was actually one of the first songs I ever heard. Funnily enough, Vapor Trails was the very first Rush album I ever bought, way back in the day, before I was even a proper music obsessive. I bought Vapor Trails because One Little Victory was on a video game I was playing at the time. And yeah, who'd have thunk that would have spawned my Rush obsession, and probably was very influential on myself as a musician, because Rush is a very influential band. But there you go, One Little Victory, one of the first Rush songs I heard, and it remains one of my favorite Rush songs, ever. It is just absolutely wicked. So yeah, then moving on to track 2, Ceiling Unlimited. Another fantastic track, and it keeps the energy of the album right off the bat, and it's got a real classic Rush flavor to it. Again, this sounds so much better with the remix, and you can actually hear what Lifeson is doing, and you can hear the subtleties of those riffs. But there's some great lyrics to it. Some of Peart's best lyrics on Ceiling Unlimited, I think. I really like that. Some of the stuff here. Let me just double check real quick some of these Yeah, if culture is the curse of the thinking class. I don't know why, I always thought that was cool. If laughter is a straw for a drowning man. And that's a great hook, too. If laughter is a curse. Really, really cool stuff. And I love the chorus, too. You know, ceiling unlimited. Can't sing and feeling unlimited. It's a fantastic track. And, you know, again, being the second song after a song that as good as One Little Victory, you know, to keep the energy up and to keep it, you know, as awesome is certainly a testament. Moving deeper into the album now, we get track 3, Ghost Rider. Now this is definitely a little bit more mellow. It's, you know, it's still high energy. I mean, it is Rush. But this is where we start to get the seriousness of the lyrics. Ghost Rider is, of course, a song written about Neil Peart's travels and, you know, the experience of just being on the road, you know, darkness on the road ahead, darkness on the road behind. And it's, you know, it's one of those songs that Peart had to write. You know, he couldn't just go off and write about, you know, whatever came to his mind. You know, this is something that he had to deal with and he had to come out with. And Ghost Rider is a fantastic track. It's also the name of his book. He wrote a book on his experiences traveling on his motorcycle as well. But yeah, it is a really, really great song, and you know, there's, you know, the musically it suits the lyrics very well, and you know, what more can be said? Ghost Rider is a great track. Moving on to track 4, Peaceable Kingdom, one of my favorites on the album. This is the big heavy song. Love that riff. Boom boom chicka boom boom chicka boom boom chicka boom chicka boom boom chicka boom boom. Really, really good stuff. And again, there's just the vocal melody is so great. You know, I love that verse. You know, billion other voices are spreading the news. That's just a great rhythm to go on top of that. And the Getty Choir again is there. There's lots of cool, you know, background Getty vocals, which you know, it's a great track. It's got a nice little kind of pre-chorus too, where it mellows out. Talk of a peaceable kingdom. And yeah, it's just what more can be said? It's a great track, very thrashy, and I mean, again, it's one of those songs that, you know, contender for one of the heaviest Rush tracks out there. So that's cool. Move on to track 5, another one of my favorites on the album, The Stars Look Down. This is a great track, and another track that the remix benefited so much. You know, song opens up, you get that, you know, big, heavy, straight-ahead riff. Boom, down, 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 down. Great riff, and just, you know, like I said, just a hammering riff that just, you know, smacks you right in the face, and it's excellent. But what makes the song so great is that chorus, that mystical chorus that comes up. You know, what is the meaning of this? And the stars look down. That whole section is just beautiful. And it's the acoustic guitars that make it. Those lush, you know, overdubbed layers of acoustic that go over that mystical chorus there. It's just so fantastic. And it's another case where, you know, on the original album, I didn't even realize that was an acoustic guitar, but, you know, when on the remix, that lush quality is there. I mean, it sounds like a classic Rush track, and it is. You know, like I said, Stars Look Down could be my favorite on the album, actually. It's a fantastic, fantastic track. We carry on to track 6, How It Is. This is a good song. You know, I would argue closest to being kind of the ballad of the album. Again, lots of nice, lush acoustic guitars that on the original album I had no idea it was even acoustic, and you know, it almost sounds like a whole new song on the remix to me. But it's a good track. Like I said, it's the poppier one on the album. It is the closer to the heart of Vapor Trails, if you like. Not as good as Closer to the Heart, but great track nonetheless. Track 7, Vapor Trail. Almost the title track. This album is Vapor Trails, plural. Track 7 is just Vapor Trail. Again, very, very seriousness with the lyrics. This is another one of the songs on the album that I think deal with Peart's experiences in the late '90s. And it's a very emotional track. You know, there's a certain urgency about Lifeson's guitar line there, and you know, you really get you know, a sense of the heartbreak and the pain, and you know, you get a sense of the heartbreak and the pain, but there's also something about, you know, hearing someone write about those experiences can also be very cathartic, and you know, in a lot of ways, you know, the song Vapor Trail, and indeed the whole album in itself, and Peart's story of, you know, going from the deepest, darkest hole and coming out of it, really is a testament to the triumph of the human spirit. I think. And you know, that's what kind of came to my mind when I listened to Vapor Trail recently. It's a powerful number, and you know, a great track on the album. Moving on to track 8, Secret Touch. Great track, another one of my favorites. This is one where you can really hear that jammy kind of influence at times. You can tell that, you know, the bits and pieces of Secret Touch were taken from these wonderful spontaneous jam sessions. So that's really, really cool. I love the intro too. As a drummer, that was one of my favorite little licks. Great bass line. I love that sort of melodic bass line that comes in there, and you know, Lifeson's playing around with the harmonics. Great track. It's also very heavy too. Once it comes in with that down, 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 down. You know, that's a mighty downbeat that strikes you well upon the face, and very high energy. You know, that those verses. You know, out of touch with the weather and the wind direction. Crazy bass line too. Again, you know, the fidelity is so bad on the original album, I didn't realize how Claypool-like the bass line is there. It's one of those frantic kind of, you know, very funky but super fast, and you know, there's a thrashiness about those verses as well, which is really, really great. Secret Touch is ace. Track 9, Earthshine, another one of the very famous ones on the album. Really, really good song, big, heavy riff, kind of a classic Rush song in a lot of ways. I love that. Very, very cool. It's got another really lush acoustic guitar part as well. It's kind of like the little transition from the verse to the chorus, and the acoustic comes in, and we got that Getty choir doing a nice kind of melodic, you know, something along those lines. Not exactly like that because I can't sing. But that I always really, really like that. It's again, it's got that sort of mystical quality, which suits the lyrics quite a bit, because of course it's talking about the phenomenon of Earthshine when you're looking at the moon and it's very, very slender, and you see the reflection of the Earth going back at it. So you can, in effect, see the dark side of the moon a little bit, which is it's an interesting phenomenon. And yeah, the music does a lot to you know, go along with that sort of you know, magical, mystical, spiritual ambience of watching the moon. So that's really, really cool. Moving on to track 10, Sweet Miracle. You know, pretty good song. There's a great sense of optimism. Again, you know, that triumph of the human spirit stuff seems present on Sweet Miracle. You know, and it really, you know, lyrically, it really seems to, you know, cherish life, and you know, ooh, sweet miracle of life. You know, it's another powerful number. Not one of my favorites on the album. I think there's better tracks on the album, but it is a great song. And again, there's a catharticism about it, which is really nice. Moving on to track 11, Nocturne. Pretty cool song about dreaming. Again, you know, it's kind of like an album track for me. I really like the lyric, did I have the dream or did the dream have me? That's kind of cool. And it goes into, you know, it's a good track. Like I said, an album track. You know, it's very much of the style of the album, and it belongs on the album, but not a highlight for me personally. Moving on to track 12, we're closing out to the album. We're getting towards the end of the album. We get Freeze, which is part 4 of Fear. I never really understood that, why they added the part 4. I always thought the Freeze series, or the Fear series was great with the 3 that were released in the 80s, Enemy Within, The Weapon, and Witch Hunt. But the part 4 was released in 2002, and I guess it's kind of like, I guess it would serve as a coda to the rest of it. But it is a really, really good song in itself, even though I don't like the Fear connection. It is a great track. Really strange sort of dissonant guitar pattern there with Lifeson, which creates a sense of urgency, which is very, you know, it fits the track quite nicely. The chorus is actually quite melodic, you know, sometimes I freeze, which is really, really good. Definitely a, you know, wouldn't call it a highlight track of the album, but it's better than Sweet Miracle, Nocturne, you know, for my personal preference anyway. Yeah, not at all a bad track. And finally we get track 13, Out of the Cradle, which wraps the whole thing up. And you know, again, you know, I've said in some of the other Rush videos, you know, sometimes I feel that they forgot how to end an album, but this one wraps things up quite nicely, actually. You know, here we are out of the cradle, endlessly rocking, and it sums up the whole triumph of, you know, going through all the things that they did and finally being a band again and releasing an album and going out on tour. And I think Out of the Cradle really does, it does a lot to sum that up. So in that sense, it is a very, very good album closer. A very good album closer. And yeah, there's some great lyrics on it. Like I said, it sums everything up quite nicely. That's the part that I'm looking up. Surge of energy. Really like that. I can't really pretend to hit those high notes right now because my voice is starting to go away for some reason. But yeah, that's it. That concludes Vapor Trails. Fantastic album at the end of the day. Certainly, I would call it an essential Rush album just because it is what it is. It is their comeback album. It is their return, and it is a unique album because we capture a spontaneity in performance that's not common with other Rush albums. So that makes it very, very worthwhile. So, thank you very much for watching my near incoherent ramblings about Vapor Trails. If you liked it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all the rest of it. And see if we can get like a little comment war going on. And see if we can get people that stick up for the original mix and people that stick up for the remix. Like I said before, I'm on the remix side, but I know there is a a fairly widespread opinion that there's something special that's captured with the muddy, noisy, over-the-top mix. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Yeah, as for the next video, I'm gonna skip over feedback because the cover thing was interesting and it was a fun album and I certainly enjoyed it. But for these videos, I'm gonna stick with the meat and potatoes, the original albums, the studio albums of original material. So that means the next video will be on Snakes and Arrows. So stay tuned for that, and you will see me in the future. Take care.